Hey all, I kind of liked how the video turned out from my office yesterday, so back to the office. Here we are. All right, let's just continue right along. In chapter 3, and this one is on grading. Now, this is it's well, I don't know. What do we want to say? We're gonna. It's one of the situations where I really have to show you things, I think, and so we're going to do almost everything within the app today, and I'm going to jump between a system with no data in it to one with lots of data in it, so we can sort of start with the no data and then show you what it looks like to have a fully populated assignment. Okay, so really we're just going to hit these issues, these 5. How do you set up grading? How do you assign grading to TAs? How do you actually do the grading? And then once you've graded, releasing the grades and transferring the grades to either your LMS gradebook or, whatever else is your final resting place for your grades. Alrighty, so yeah, I'm just going to break out of here, and to start with, so this is now, I'm logged in as a faculty member, and I'm just going to go into the usual demo course that we create, and I'm going to pick one of these, and it doesn't really matter which, so let me just pick the guitar one and hop in. So here's the manage screen. Now what we're going to start by doing is actually editing the grading. Okay, so how we do that, and again, there's 2 ways to get at it. The simplest way is right here, but also when you're setting up an activity in the first place, remember you come up with this screen. And so you could define your activity here, you could set your dates here, and then you could get at the grading here as well. Okay, so 2 different ways to get at the same one. I won't use this one, I'll come at it this way. But you see it's essentially the same interface here, just overlaying on the background. Okay, so setting up the grading. So this is where a faculty member really should sit and think about, all right, students have just went through this process, and all of the information from what they've done is there in the system. What do I actually want graded, and how do I want that graded? And so I'll touch on these 2 in a second, the peer ratings and the student participation. But let's begin by just thinking about a situation where there's a human being is going to do some grading at the end of the process. So students have gone through the process, and now somebody's going to come in and do some grading, okay? And so that's what we call the instructor or teaching evaluation kind of process. Now we have to say, okay, well, what are the grades you want to provide? And you know that familiar tool, here it is again, we can use this for constructing essentially a grading assessment form. So when whoever is doing the grading, we can have certain questions that we want them to answer after they've reviewed the work of a student. And this becomes the source of the grades. And you'll see this as we build up. We can use things, by the way, that if we've already done things in the activity, we've set up assessments, one of the things we can do is have the teacher do the same thing as the students did. So for example, there was a point where students were asked to actually give a composition a grade out of 20. You could just choose that and import it, and now the grader will also be asked to give that grade out of 20. So you can do that. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to build one from scratch, but just be aware you can reuse any assessments you've already created if you want to do the same thing. But let me show you let me begin with a sort of minimalist approach, I think. So as a minimalist approach, people should grade the final product. Let's call this the quality of the final product. Right? So this is what students are revising and creating, and so you want that to be worth something, and it can be worth anything you want it to be worth. So let's say we're going to make this out of 6 in this case. What's the minimum value? Sure, let's have it 0. And sure, let's take it whole numbers only. But if you uncheck this, then people can enter a 5.5 or 3.5. So do you want that or not? But then you save that. Okay, now this is one of the things every grader is going to be asked to respond to here. Now, we may want them to also give a comment with their mark. So here's our little comment field, comments related to final product, to the final product. Okay. Now that's cool. Now this is, what we've done here is sort of mimic a traditional situation, right? A faculty member assigns some activity. Students now go through this whole peer assessment process and they end up with a final product, and that's now going to get a grade and comments. That would be, doing this would be essentially what instructors typically do. Now, let me suggest what I would recommend is that you grade at least one other thing, and that is the quality of the feedback. And let me show you, just so you kind of get some options. We could do this. We can say quality of feedback given to peers. Feedback absent. So imagine your TA going through feedback weak or shallow. Minimal effort. Applied. Feedback deep and useful. Great effort. Okay, so now what I've got is a pull down where a TA would look at the feedback that a student provided, and I'll show you how they would do that in a moment, but they would look at the feedback a student provided, and then they would just categorize it as one of these three. So this is an option. Now, here I want to kind of make you aware of this gear, because this gear can be used to literally change the value that certain answers get. So in this case, for example, I would probably give 0 for minimal. And look, here's where you can kind of decide. You can make it a 1 and you can make it a 3 if you really wanted to reward that a lot, or a 2, etc. But now, oops, sorry, I added an extra category. I didn't mean to do that. So now what this will look like is just a pull down where they'll have to pick one of these. But as they pick one, that'll get translated into a grade. Okay, so that can be part of the grading interface as well there. Now, notice we haven't made these worth any points yet. So we can do this here. We made it a mark out of 6 that they have to provide, so we might as well make it out of 6 points too, mirror that. This one would be out of 2 points probably, right? Because we had that 0, 1, 2, 3. All right. Now, I think this is a perfectly fine, perfectly reasonable assessment, and you could stop there. And so, or you could even add, actually, let's go one a little further. Let's just add comments related to feedback. Actually, no, I'm going to take that back. So you could, but with the drop down, you've already kind of got the comment built in, right? Which is the kind of the nice thing. Students can see the rating they got and the comment that went along with that. So you don't need a comment. So this is great. Now let me just mention some of the other things you could include here. You could, and probably with a point system, do the quality of the initial draft, of the initial submission. And maybe you don't want that worth a whole lot. Maybe 3 points. Sure, save. We'll make that out of 3. Why would you do this? Well, to encourage students to at least originally submit something reasonably valuable, right? So that when other students are giving feedback, they're giving feedback on something. So what you're trying to avoid here is students who, oh, this is due last minute, let me just submit 4 sentences. And if they do that, then the people who get that to review obviously don't have much to work with. And so, things kind of don't work as well as when they really had done a good effort in the first place. So to encourage them to do a good effort, you might want to make it something like this, a 3-point scale. And again, you could, when we do this, we do this, but we do this more on, in fact, I think I use a 2-point scale. I think, so if I wanted to edit that, I think I use a 2-point scale here. When I do this, literally. And what I ask TAs is just take a quick look at the submission. if there's a submission, they're probably not going to get 0. But does it look like they just threw something together quick without much thought? That's a 1. It doesn't look like they've actually put thought and effort, even without reading it. Just from the amount of text and the look of it, the number of references, you can probably say, okay, they put effort into it, and that gets a 2. So that can be graded pretty quickly, for example. You can also grade anything you want. You'll see in my actual class experiment, I asked them to reflect on the changes they make, and I chose to grade that. At any rate, you get the sense. You can define this, and as you do this, you're kind of doing 2 things. One is you are actually creating your grading rubric. You're specifying the value you're giving to all these points. The other thing is, when the person who's grading is grading, these are the things they're going to be asked to input values for. And when they do input values, whatever they input will be reflected back to the student. So the student's going to be able to see the breakdown of these grades in the comments after the fact. Okay, you'll see that in action in just a moment. Notice you can also grade anonymously. What this means is that when the person that's grading is within the grading interface and moving from student to student, they do not see the name of the student. They only see the work. Students really like this when they're told, by the way, all the grading is done anonymously. They really like it because to them it signals to them that you're worried about the work, the quality of the work, and that any biases related to how exotic their name might be or whatnot will not factor in. Their gender, anything you could discern from a name disappears. All you have is the work, and that really makes them feel like you've removed the potential for bias. So that's really cool. Now, of course, once you grade them, the grades end up in the grade book, and they are associated with the name, and so all of that still, it's only while you're doing the grading process. Okay, so this would be an example of a human going in and grading, and ultimately an assignment would be out of 10, and here are the human components. Okay, so let's talk about other options that you have for grading. And I'm going to kind of do a sandwich thing. I'm going to flip to the other side of the bread here and then come back to the middle, because the middle is sort of one you got to wrap your head around a little bit. So let's come back to the peer ratings and start with the student participation. Student participation is pretty easy. It is what it sounds like. So if you really just want students to do the steps and you're just going to give them points if they do stuff, and you're not going to worry too much about how well they've done it, the quality. You can just give students participation points, and you can break this down quite easily. So you can pick the phase. What do you want them to do? If they submit an original composition, that's good for a point, for example. And they don't even have to complete the phase in this case. So if I had some additional questions, they can answer them or not. They're not going to be punished if they don't. They're not going to be rewarded if they do, for example. In the assess phase, similarly, we could say, no, I want them to complete the whole assess phase, and that's worth 2 points. And the reflect phase, I want them to assess the feedback for a point, and I want them to submit the revised edition, and they get 2 if they do that. Okay, so notice this is 6 points, but it's just, did they do these things? So this is all automatically calculated. You can just, if all you had was this, you could just press grade, and boom, the class would be graded. Okay, in this participation way. Okay, and right now, of course, we've got a mix of those 2 going on. So we've created now something that's out of 16 points overall. That's a mix of instructor grades and participation grades. All right, so now let's talk about the one in the middle. Peer ratings. We have had peers give values for things. So for example, in the assess phase, they were given the question, if you were the teacher grading the submission, what grade would you give it? And so for a given submission, there were 5 peers who gave a grade to that submission. And you can say, you know what, I want to use those towards the marks. I want to use, well, you can use the mean if you want, the mean of those ones. You can choose the median or the mode, or you can drop. And drop means drop the lowest and the highest and take the mean of the middle. So let's do that one for now. And you could say, I want that to be worth, even though they were given a mark at a 20, you could say, I just want that to be worth 2, but I want them to know the grades they're giving are part of the final product. Okay, and so you can do that. Now notice, which of the following did the student do well? They all have value. You could have went in and put values to all those check marks, and you could add up all of those. So you could use something like that. Star ratings, these all have numbers, and so you can essentially choose which of these you want to use. You can only choose one sort of assessment method, so whatever you apply. So if this was the stars too, if you're going to say how many stars would you give it, I'm going to make that worth 2 points as well. But again, it will drop the highest number of stars and the lowest number of stars, average the middle number of stars, and if that was out of 5 and you ended up with a 3 out of 5, this person would get you get the idea. 60% of 2, so a 1.2 out of 2, etc. Okay, so exactly, you're using the peer things. Now, peers also assess the feedback, right? In the reflect phase. So you could, in fact, isn't that nice? You could, in fact, have the student's grades on the feedback. So rather than you assessing the quality of a student's feedback, that student was assessed by 5 or 6 peers. So you could say, yeah, I want to use that, and I want to use the median, I don't know why, value for that feedback and make it worth 2 points. Okay, cool. All right, so you get the idea. There's 3 things. Now, these last 2 can be performed in an automated way. And as far as these peer ratings, when you're using average peer ratings, there is now a number of publications that show that as long as the average is based on at least 5 peers, and some say even 4, our research suggests 5 or 6, then you can trust that grade. It's equivalent to a TA grade. So in terms of the validity of the grade, it's valid. Whether students sometimes like having a human-given grade, they prefer that to a peer average sometimes. But again, you can mix and match these things as you choose. And in some cases of very large classes where there are not resources for grading, but they want to have a bunch of, say, written activities, they use only average peer ratings. And you can use that and ultimately get grades out of it and not require anyone to grade. You basically just say grade now, and it bases it based on the averages that students gave one another. Okay, cool. Whew. That's grading setup. And all of that is reflected in the summary over here once you've done it. And again, when a human is going through, this will govern what they see and have to fill in. These other things are done in an automated way when you say grade. Okay. Something else I'll just mention quickly while we're on this grading options page. You can also assign, okay, so I have no teaching assistants in this class, so I can't here, but if I had teaching assistants, I can assign students to the teaching assistants. I can either just randomly do it, tell it how many to assign to each assistant, or I can actually drag and drop students to specific assistants, etc. When you do that, the really nice thing from the teaching assistant perspective is that when they log in to do their grading, they only ever see the students assigned to them. So they have a really good sense of where they are in their grading and how things are going in that regard. Okay, cool, excellent. So you can do that too. All right, so that's setting up the grading, assigning gradings to TAs, and so now we want to get to the, okay, we've got them all assigned, let's actually do it. Okay, now what I've chosen to do here is to actually take my live instance, and you may see on the interface I may have to actually shade out student names if they ever come up. So if you see some weird looking thing on the video, a box over something, that's just me hiding student information. But I just think it's cool for a couple of reasons to do things this way. So one of the things, so let me just be clear, sorry, I kind of jumped into that. What I've done is gone into our learning management system at Toronto, and this is actually, it's called Quarkus, it's branded as Quarkus, but it's actually Canvas underneath the hood. And so just to show you, within Canvas, we have our peerScholar activity here. And so I am, again, an instructor. And so when I launch into it, by the way, it always takes a while because my class is 1,700 students large. And so that 1,700 student class Yeah, it takes a while to load into the grading interface, and you'll see why. By the way, the grading interface is perhaps, well, it's not perhaps, it is the most complex slash powerful. I don't know how you want to, do we want to put a nice spin on it? Yeah, our goal in creating the grading face was basically to allow the grader to get at every piece of information they might wish. So I'm not going to edit the grading. Well, yeah, okay, I will edit. I won't actually edit anything. But let me show you the grading that we set up. So first of all of our grading, we didn't use the peer ratings or the student participation. It was all based on a TA coming in after the fact. And here you get the sense. They measured the quality of the draft, or they had to put a mark for the quality of the draft, quality of the final product, quality of the reflection. This is students justifying the changes they made and they didn't make. So I have TAs looking at that as well. And the quality of the comments that each student made to their peers. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And so if we actually go to grade now, these have already been graded. So we will see information in there, but this will give you a real clear sense. So yes, I will have put a box up near the top of this interface here. You may have noticed that we didn't say grade anonymously in our grading thing, which surprises me actually. I almost always want to grade anonymously. I think that was an oversight. And so there is the student name at the top middle, and there is the student name at the top left of the composition here. And you also see various other student information, which you wouldn't. So you'll see a few little boxes while you're going through this. But let me just show you what we have here. So let's start on the left side. No, let's start on the right side, because this should be familiar to you. These are those things we set up: quality of draft, final product, recollection, comments to peers, and then the comments, right? And so this is ultimately, when a TA is grading, this is where they will enter their grades and their comments over here on the rightmost side. Cool. All the information they need is available in these two panels. Now let's start at the leftmost panel here. What the leftmost panel shows is the person's draft, and then you can click on the revised to see their revised work, and you can also click on the changed to see what's different between the draft and the revised. Okay, so that gives you a sense of how much they actually revised. And so again, when I have students doing quality of the draft, they just look at that very quickly. Like this, you'd very quickly say that's a 2. Because it's obvious this student put a little bit of effort into what they did. And so some of these can be very quick. Quality of the final product, well, here we actually read through this very carefully and do a grade based on the actual argument presented, etc. Quality of the reflection and the quality of comments to peers. So let's keep these two things in mind, and well, let's go over here. Okay, so this middle panel is linked to this upper bar. And so in this case, you'll notice as I flip the peers, the middle panel is changing. So the middle panel is actually showing, in this case, what peer 1 thought of that. Okay, so they're actually seeing, let me just expand this a little bit, just to fill the screen a bit more for you. They're actually seeing what did their peer do well. So this person, peer 1, is saying what this person did well. What is the one thing the peer could change? You also see the rubric ratings, etc. Okay, so all of this is the feedback this student received from peer 1, and this is the feedback they received from peer 2, from peer 3, etc. And so when you're looking at the quality of their revision or something, you've got this data available. You know what every peer told them, and you can mine that. Now there isn't really anything on the grades that's connected to that too much, so that piece isn't going to be that important. But now, okay, get ready. This is the part that bends people's heads. See these little 3 dots? When you click on these 3 dots, you can toggle this between the feedback this student received versus the feedback this student gave to others. So if we want to grade the quality of this person's comments, we have to toggle this over to the feedback given to peers. So we flip it, and now what we're seeing here is the feedback that original student gave. Now we've noticed this has changed and this has become gray because this is the paper that they gave feedback to. Okay, so when they were assessing and went to peer 1, this is the paper they found, and here's the feedback they gave. Peer 2, here's the feedback they gave. Now again, I told you once before, you can tend to grade this pretty easily. Simply by looking at their critical analysis, you can get a pretty good sense. So I mean, this person's doing somewhere between shallow and deep. Okay, so they are giving the person some information. I've certainly seen a lot better, but not bad. It's relatively, yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. I would like to see a lot more rich feedback, and so would the TA, right? The TA gave this a 2 out of 4 in terms of the quality of the feedback. But again, you can get at that very easily here. I'm going to toggle back to the main view. Quality of the reflection. All right, so you see the reactions of the peers. You also see, by the way, what this person gave to themselves. If they gave themselves a 7 out of 10, if that's ever relevant. But see this more? This more is the additional assessments. And one of the things I asked them was this: please reflect on the feedback you received from your peers. What feedback did you choose to incorporate? What did you not incorporate? Why did you make these decisions? And so now they have a justification piece. And so I have TAs read that, and that becomes the quality of their reflection. Okay, so again, that's really the works. Our goal is to kind of make as much of that accessible as possible to you while you're grading. The TA fills these things out, presses save, goes on to the next student, etc. All right, cool. Let's go back. All right. Disk is almost full. That's nice. Okay, so let me be quick, lest this video take too much space, and just say, let's go back to our peer assessment thing. As far as the other 2 points, releasing the grades, you actually see this hide or not. And so normally you would hide them until you're ready to release them. See, right now it says grades are visible because it's green, but when you click it, you'll see it dim down. Well, we'll do it. No one's looking right now. So if I click down, it goes to that and it says show. Click it back, and now it's visible. Okay, so very simple. So that means while you're doing the grading, you can hide everything, and then when you're ready to unveil it, you press that, and now when students log in, they're able to see the grades and all that information as well. And finally, transferring the grades, which probably needs another R there. If you're in the LMS integrated way of doing things, which I am here, then one grade automatically transfers. So when I say one grade, I mean this grade out of 12 is transferred as a percentage. And then on the gradebook side, you can sometimes, say whatever mark you want that out of. Well, you can. You can multiply that by whatever you want it out of. But with an LMS integrated, it's just one grade that's transferred. If you're not using the LMS integrated version, then if you go to, the gradebook functionality over here, then after grading is complete, you see all of this information, and one of the things you can do is download your CSV. So a CSV file that has all this information that you can then connect up, that you can then bring into any Excel file you have or upload into your LMS if you need to do that. So that's how you actually transfer the grades and get them out. Okay, cool. I think we're done. I think that's it for the grading video. So I'm going to be quiet before my disk fills up totally. Thank you very much. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.